They handed her my present and smiled like they'd handed me a verdict. The paper tore, metal flashed, and the room smelled for a second, like perfume and something that would never belong to me again. I remember the cake, half-melted candles, wobbling. The year was stupid and small, my hands were full of nothing. They pushed a box across the table. Not toward me. Toward Elena. Her fingers found a watch inside, sleek, bright, a little smug. Someone had carved her initials into the back like a signature on a will. My mother, Maris, tilted her chin and said it as if she were instructing a class, "You don't need more." Daniel, my father, leaned back like a man with all the answers and added, "You should be grateful you get to watch." That was the sound of the last candle in my chest going out. I didn't throw a thing. I didn't shout. I stood, thanked them the way you say thank you when you mean something else, and walked out of the house as if the night had nothing left for me. Silence, for once, felt heavy enough to break bone. I left with only a backpack and a sentence I kept to myself: I will not be watched. I cut the cord on purpose. No calls. No holiday smiles. I learned how to cook for one. I learned to sleep without slipping into the hollow of someone else's approval. Paycheck by paycheck I began to stitch a life that had seams to it, not the assembly line patchwork they called family. The first place was a studio with a radiator that banged in winter. Then a crusty rental with a leaky faucet that taught me patience. I put down payments as if I were planting trees I could not eat from yet. I saved, scraped, refused handouts like they were poison. The funny thing, when you stop asking to be seen, you start to see the world differently. The world becomes currency you earn. The world gives you small, honest things: a street with walnut trees, a landlord who doesn't care who you are, a neighbor who returns your mail. Little proofs that you could be more than the family's footnote. But I did not merely grow. I watched. From a distance I kept notes, not with malice, but because curiosity is a weak kind of fury. I started collecting paper like some people collect stamps, old bank statements, a few court notices, a ledger here, a bounced check there. Names that should not have been in the same column were there: car payments, hush loans, favors that look like kindness but are actually mortgages on a person's dignity. Elena spent like rent meant nothing. Daniel made gestures that paid accounts behind the scenes. Maris staged afternoons for the neighbors with floral centerpieces and receipts forged like signatures on shame. I kept receipts in a folder. I learned to find patterns in shame. I learned that people who live loud rarely keep the books tidy. I did the sensible thing: I put my house in a trust, precise and boring as a tax form. I paired clauses like bricks so nothing could be uprooted by guilt trips or temper tantrums. My lawyer, yes, the human who smelled of coffee and logic, read the contracts until the letters were comfortable. I put locks where affection used to be, but legal safety felt thin if all I did was hide. I wanted them to understand how brittle their posture was. So I fed small pieces of truth into places that would listen. A whispered tip here. A photocopy of a statement there. I didn't shout. I nudged. I accelerated, and ending that financed itself through neglect. 3 years later, shoes on my welcome mat. They arrived with the same faces but with a different kind of hunger, one that smells like apology that's already calculating. Elena stood in the doorway as if she had been invited in for tea and takeout. Daniel kept his voice low and rehearsed. Maris clutched a purse the way some people clutch old beliefs. This ought to belong to her, Maris said, sweeping the living room with a hand that had once decided everything. She meant it. She had already done the mental renovations. I let them look. I let their eyes trace lines of my life as if they were inheritance clues. I let the silence do what silence does best, reveal what people pretend not to notice. I led them to the couch and put the TV on. Not to show them slides of my trophies. I cued a file I had assembled: documents, time-stamped emails, video clips, confirmations of the unpaid bills, signatures that didn't mean what they seemed to mean, transfers that began with personal favor and ended with foreclosure pending. They watched as the last comfortable myths dissolved, that the family was a single body with shared honor. Elena's smirk started as a twitch and then unraveled into a question. Daniel's jaw loosened as if jaw pain could let out the truth. Maris tried to reach for explanations and found nothing that fit. You put this together. Elena whispered like a child who had found a forbidden room. I answered, not with a roar but with an inventory. While you were collecting gifts, I was collecting paper. While you learned to look rich, I learned the math of ruin. I gave them the last thing to hold, a stack of notices I'd had delivered that morning, legal papers, stamped and final. Foreclosure. Liens. Notices the bank had sent and that Daniel had never wanted to hand to himself. Your house, I said softly, is no longer yours. They fell into the kind of sound only shame knows, small animal noises, suppressed and useless. Maris reached for me, secret tears wetting the cuff of her sleeve. Daniel sputtered that family matters should be handled within family. Elena's eyes were glass. She begged, not for money, not even for the watch, but for a reprieve from the knowledge she had helped build. Standing there, I had a choice. I could have turned the key and sealed the night with a final, theatrical cruelty. I could have locked the door and watched them vanish into the cold. Or I could do something no one expected. I opened the front door. The street outside smelled like early rain. Elena passed by me, fragile as paper. Daniel and Maris shuffled after her, their apologies already thin as air. I did not shout them back. I did not slap them with speeches. I closed the door softly, not because I felt free, but because I realized I felt something else. I did not keep the house. 2 weeks later the house sold. The buyer paid more than the market whispered it deserved. I took the difference, the thing that had been a ledger item instead of a memory, and turned it into a small foundation. It's not righteous charity. It's not a redemption arc for me. It's simple arithmetic with a conscience, funds for people cut out of families, small grants for education, rent support for those who've been told they don't deserve. I created a space where people could be seen without being priced. So did I get revenge? Yes. Did I feel victorious when they left? There was a hollow joy, like finishing a long, terrible book. But revenge tastes like ash if you do not make something from it. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're unworthy, comment below. Tell me a short line I was told I didn't deserve. I'll pin a few, I promise. If you've been the one who built with someone else's silence, maybe leave a note too. I am not here to tell you how to feel. I'm here to say, we carry what we are given, and sometimes we have to turn it into something bigger than the wrongs we survived. The last thing you should picture is the empty watch box on my kitchen table, no gift inside, just paper and a tiny smear of perfume where it once lay. I set it on the shelf like a relic from a childhood I refused to inherit. Every morning I make coffee. Every morning I look at the shelf and remember how a small, rotten kindness almost taught me to stay small. If this story hooked you, say so. Share it. And if you're brave, tell one sentence of your own in the comments. Let us witness you, unfiltered.